Johnny, it's a big show. Brent Maguire, Locked On Angels legend, is
Let's
joining us.
go.
And we're hoping that he has all of the answers to fix all of our questions for the Halos. We know he does. Like, how would he fix the pitching staff, the hitters, all of that stuff. So we're going to get into it in just a moment. But first, you're Locked On with Mike and John, and this is Locked On Angels.
You are Locked On Angels, your daily Los Angeles Angels podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we thank you for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Every show is free and available on all platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And the best way to help us out is by giving us a rate and a review. Super Halo Mom would appreciate 5 stars. And those watching on YouTube, you can like the show and you can comment on the show. You can subscribe to the show and you can click the bell to be notified every time a new episode drops.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Locked On Angels, where it's your team every day. You've got the Frisch Brothers here with you, a.k.a. the Super Halo Bros. My name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
We've got an awesome guest in the house, former Locked On Angels host, Brent Maguire, Locked On Angels Hall of Famer, baby. Brent, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me on, guys. It's been a while.
Absolutely. Can I just say that, man, in the dark, cold winter months of like 2020, we're all cooped up inside our houses. There's not much going on. That's when I really found Locked On Angels, and you were hosting. So you were a saving grace, my friend, in the time where there was like little to no Angels news, little to no baseball news. So I am very grateful for you and all that you did while you were here, and just the information you provided. You kept me locked on, my friend.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that was definitely a strange time for all of us. So I vividly remember doing those podcasts during that very weird time in all of our lives.
I think I was bouncing between you and then Jared and Nate over at Talking Halos. I was trying to get as much Angels content as I could consume, and so it's kind of poetic that we're all here now, which is really exciting.
It's super easy for us because there was an actual season and there wasn't a pandemic, so I'm sure your creative juices had to really start flowing to try to figure out what to talk about. And we had joked about that on yesterday's show. We had Steve Granado, who followed you on Locked On Angels with us, and when the Angels were losing 14 in a row, it was tough, but at least we had content to talk about. When the pandemic hit and there was no season, it was like, all right, man. Well, the grass is still green at Angel Stadium, so that's good news, right?
Exactly. Hey, the Angels always give you something to talk about.
That's
there
true.
is that. It's not always a good thing, but there is stuff to talk about.
Plenty of topics of conversation. Absolutely. Brent, just for those, who are familiar with you and remember you from Locked On Angels, what have you been up to since the show?
Yeah, so a lot of big changes in my personal life. I got married. I finished my MBA degree. The latest adventure was trying to help open a craft brewery in Redlands. And there were a lot of fun aspects of doing that and trying to get it open from, the ground up. But opening a business is very difficult. So we're still kind of in that process to try to open that up. But yeah, it's crazy. That was my first time in a long time that I was truly away from baseball. There was like a 5 or 6 month period where I was following it, but like with the lockout and not having an outlet to write at or podcast on, I was kind of like off the grid from all of it.
Yeah.
And then so a combination of things happened in the last couple months where I was back into baseball again. We've had issues opening up this brewery, and I've kind of had this desire to get back into baseball. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm kind of slowly trying to venture back into the baseball world. And, I'm kind of exploring all my options at this point.
Well, you can see it on the YouTube side, but if you're on the audio side, you can follow Brent at BMags94. He's a great follow on Twitter, always insightful, always has the latest and greatest information on whatever big game is happening. Of course, I know you've been active during the World Series and tweeting away and keeping everybody up to date. But be sure you give Brent a follow on Twitter. He's a fantastic follow there. Now, we brought you on because you've always been so insightful. You've always had some great reads into the team and what they need to do. And of course, you've got that history here on the show. But we want to know, what kind of owner does Brent Maguire want for our beloved Halos?
So it's a loaded question. I think
no easy questions.
No softballs on this baseball podcast.
Right. For sure. So I'm definitely not alone among baseball fans and Angels fans who have grown tired of the current owner, the way he has operated over, the last 10 years, but really more the last 5 years. I mean, there's been a deterioration in a lot of aspects of the Angels organization.
Right.
So I think in the nicest way possible, the bar to clear is very low for the incoming owner. So we're looking for someone that can come in and really just put more effort into creating a better organization from top to bottom. Obviously, we want to see the results at the top. We want to see the major league team do well. We have not seen the Angels make the playoffs since 2014. I mean, they've been below 500 since 2016. They got to get back to that level where they're at least playing competitive baseball. And I think the next owner needs to come in and try to fix that right away. And obviously, you've got the elephants in the room. Shohei Ohtani's in his final year under contract. Mike Trout is only getting older. I mean, we've been talking about this for years. You've got to take advantage of these guys while you have two of the generational greats still on your roster. So there's got to be an effort from the owner to come in and put some instant success on the MLB roster. It's going to be hard, but you've got to have an owner that does that. Beyond just the stuff at the MLB level, there needs to be a change in the organizational culture. The Angels have been in the middle of numerous controversies, lawsuits. There's just a lot of icky stuff going on with the Angels organization right now. I think there needs to be a shift with the organizational culture. So again, I think a lot of this starts at the top. You need an owner who's going to want to invest into the major league team a little bit more than Artie Moreno maybe has over the last 5 years. You need to see a change in the player development program. You need to see just a shift in the way that the Angels are operating, because they're clearly behind the rest of Major League Baseball, at least a lot of teams right now, and the way they're operating. And I think getting a new owner, getting just a fresh face in there and someone who is excited about the organization, I think that's going to do just wonders for the organization.
Absolutely.
All right, Brent, pull out your crystal ball, and you're going to predict what's going to happen with Shohei Ohtani. So I know it's hard to put aside your Angel fandom, and so if you want to let that play into this, you can. But if we're talking about Shohei a year from now, you came back on the show in November of next year, what are we talking about in regards to Shohei Ohtani? Where is he? Is he on the team? Has he signed a contract? What are your thoughts there?
I've always felt like the Angels, and especially with Artie Moreno at the helm, have made the effort to sign their big stars or to go to free agency to do that. But with the change in ownership, I don't feel quite as confident in saying that. My best guess, the way I'm looking at it, is Ohtani's going to play the entire season with the Angels next year, regardless of where the club is at. I don't think they're going to trade the guy. I also think they might offer him a contract extension, but until a lot of this ownership stuff is kind of figured out and they've made that transition, I don't know if we're going to see that mega deal. I mean, we are talking about, he could make $500 million.
Yeah, right.
Next deal. I mean, he brings that kind of value on the field, and from a marketing perspective, I mean, there's no player like him. And I think Ohtani realizes that. I think his agent realizes that. So they're a year removed from literally anybody having the option to sign him. So it's going to take quite a bit of money, I think, for him to sign with the Angels. And because we're so close and because of this ownership change incoming, I don't think he's going to get traded. I don't think the Angels are going to successfully sign him to a long-term deal. I do think that he's going to end up around, a year from now, he's going to become a free agent and he's going to be free to sign with whatever team wants to give him the most money or whatever situation is the most accommodating for him.
Yeah, it's going to be a crazy offseason if he reaches free agency, just unprecedented in terms of numbers and deals and incentives in his contract. Of the names that are rumored to be out there, are there any owners that strike you as, ooh, that'd be a good one? I'd love for that guy to take over the team. Any names?
Yeah, I think Ballmer makes the most sense with the Clippers. You've got the local ties. He's got a lot of money. I think there's been some hints that he is maybe interested in purchasing another team. And I think that one makes a lot of sense. I know there's been some discussion. I'm blanking on the name at the moment. The guy from the LA Times has apparently been in the running for at least talking with the Angels. So that could happen as well. So I couldn't tell you exactly who the front runner is at this point, but those are two guys that come to mind.
Stan Kroenke, I think, was a part of that conversation as well. I think when they interviewed him, he said no comment, or at least somebody said no comment on his behalf.
And I think he winked.
Yeah, exactly.
And then Jacob LeCobb, I think he's one of the owners with the Golden State Warriors. And so those were two names that Johnny and I talked about. And then I know that there were some rumored names from a group of people from Japan and a few different places. So yeah, that big question mark really causes a lot of question marks on the Halos. But one question mark that isn't in there is Mike Trout. Like, he's with us unless we trade him, and he has to prove that trade. What are your expectations for Trout next season? Do you think he's going to have a full healthy season? I mean, the guy was incredible. He was supposed to retire because his back was, given out on him this year. That was the rumor, right? And then he comes back and hits 40 home runs. And so what are your thoughts on Mike Trout this next season? What are your expectations for this guy?
So when the guy's out on the field, he's still one of the best players on the field. I mean, Going back the last 2 years, even with the injuries, if you look at OPS plus, he's number one in baseball.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been better than Aaron Judge. He's been better than Yordan Alvarez from an offensive perspective. When he's out there, the production is still amazing. But when you talk about Mike Trout now, you can't not talk about the injuries. And unfortunately, it's been part of the conversation. I'm not going to say he's injury prone, but I think it's fair to say that we can expect Mike Trout to miss 30, 40 games a year or so. And maybe that's okay. I mean, maybe if you're getting 120 games of elite production out of Trout, that's okay. I think the days of him playing 150 plus games in center field, those days are not coming back. It's just the natural reality of getting older. Mike Trout's been doing this for a long time. He came up when he was 19 and was immediately one of the best players. It's gonna wear your body down. So look, Trout's still one of the best players in baseball. He's going to be whenever he's out on the field. The big question is, how many games are you going to get from him a year? I think at this point, if you get 120 games from him a season moving forward, that's probably a win for the Angels.
All right, all done with these softball questions. Coming up on Locked On Angels, Brent is going to share how he's going to fix the Halos, and I can't wait to talk about that. But first, Locked On Angels is brought to you by SimpliSafe. In the last decade, over 4 million people have said yes to SimpliSafe home security systems to protect their home, and because of that, we have seen safety increase in all sorts of neighborhoods, because at SimpliSafe, your safety is what matters. They protect you with cutting-edge security technology, powered by 24/7 professional monitoring agents who always have your back. And here's why you'll love SimpliSafe. It's super customizable. You don't have to purchase things that you don't need in order to get what you want. The system integrates well into your home, and it's easy to self-install, which is something that I appreciate. You don't have to have a tech come out and schedule all that and have them walk through your house. And you won't have this bulky unit, which is really nice, up on your wall that damages or messes up your home's design. This system will bring the security that you want and the peace of mind that you need while you're asleep at night or while you're away during the day. SimpliSafe is easy to use, whether you're controlling the system from the app, where you're accessing and watching crystal clear HD live stream security cameras, or you're talking with one of the agents who are monitoring your system and they call you the moment a threat is detected to get you the help that you need. You can customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes at simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb. And you can save 20% on your SimpliSafe security system when you sign up for an interactive monitoring plan, and you'll get your first month free. So visit simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb to learn more. And remember, there's no safe like SimpliSafe.
We want to thank you for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. And for your second listen today, you got to check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today is available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts.
Brent, whenever the Angels are talked about, especially when fans talk about their favorite team, the conversation always goes to, we need pitching, right? And then this season, we actually had pitching, and that was a really incredible thing. We'll talk about how pathetic the hitters are in the next segment, but let's talk about pitching for just a moment. How would you improve this team, fix this team? Are there minor league guys that you see? Are the guys already there, or would you go and get some free agents?
So, yeah, like you said, the Angels pitching was good this year. I mean, by every single measure, they were like in the top 15 of the league. Like, they were a good unit by ERA, strikeouts, limiting hard contact. I mean, everything you wanted to see, they performed. Obviously, We'll talk about the offense in a little bit, but the pitching was not the problem. I do want to caution against thinking that that's what the Angels are going to get again next year, and looking beyond just, we performed well this past year. We need to go improve the offense, but not look at the pitching. I like the rotation. I do think that Ohtani is a legitimate ace. I think Sandoval and Detmers slot in nicely right in the middle of your rotation. Suarez is a nice back end guy, but I do think they're missing at least one other good starter. You look at free agency, Carlos Rodon obviously is a guy that jumps out, but he's probably going to get a lot of money. And given the Angels' other needs, I'm not sure he's going to end up making much sense. But there's some other options that do. Chris Bassett, Tyler Anderson, guys like that could fit in quite nicely in the middle of the Angels' rotation, just to give you another guy that's going to give you both quality and quantity. We can be optimistic about the progression of guys like Detmers and Sandoval and Suarez, and also realize that pitching tends to be very volatile, especially for a team like the Angels. We have seen this story play out where they're short on pitching, and all of a sudden, the middle of the season, they're rolling out, I don't know, Tim Lincecum as the number 3 starter. Something like that.
That was good.
So you look at the rotation, this is probably the best rotation they've had in quite a while, but I do think they need at least one other arm at the top. So my preference would be someone like Anderson or Bassett, who you're going to get 150 plus, not amazing innings, but quality innings that the Angels could use. I am less optimistic about the bullpen. The Raisel Iglesias trade looked questionable at the time, and I think as time goes along, they're probably going to regret that one, because the Angels need that kind of arm at the back of their bullpen. Yes, relief pitching is very volatile. We saw that play out last year, but the Angels are short on talent at the back end of their bullpen right now. You look at the current group of guys, and I can probably confidently say that Jimmy Herget is maybe the one guy I feel good about going into next year. Everybody else is presenting their own questions. So you look at the bullpen, I think they've got to go make some moves. And it's hard because they threw a bunch of money at relievers last offseason to build what was supposed to be a good bullpen, and it didn't work out. So do you want to keep throwing money at the bullpen trying to fix that? Or do you want to go the cheaper route to try to infuse newer pitching into the bullpen? I don't know. I think you've got to go at least acquire one arm in free agency. You've got a guy like Seth Lugo or Rafael Montero, guys that have performed pretty well this year and at least give you some stability. But rebuilding the bullpen is always a tough conversation because of the nature of relief pitching. But just looking at the whole for the Angels, they need some pitching. They need, I think, at least one other quality starter, and we'll see what happens with the bullpen.
Oh, the days of Scott Shields and Brendan Donnelly and Troy Percival and A-Rod and John, you talk, because I got to weep.
I was just going to say, I feel very good about my off-season moves when I played general manager, because Brent brought up Rafael Montero and Tyler Anderson. So if they're endorsed by Brent, then then I feel good about those.
Are you flexing? You're flexing right now, aren't you?
I'm flexing, man.
That's totally fair. That's totally fair.
Wow. Yeah, you're right. And that's the thing is we can get really stoked about what the pitching staff did this last season, but you bring up a good point that the expectations can't be, oh, they'll do it again, because they are young guys and they are still trying to figure it out. When it comes to some of those guys that haven't really stayed or haven't really been there too long, like a Chase Silseth, are there any guys in the minor leagues that you're aware of that you would say, I could see them maybe having a good run in the major leagues next season?
I could definitely see both Sam Bachman and Kai Busch coming up and making contributions. Is it going to be in the rotation? I'm not quite sure yet, but I do think they have a role next year. I think we could see something like them coming up mid-season around June or July, pitching out of the bullpen. Obviously, things happen. You have to promote guys quicker than expected. Like Reed Detmers was promoted a lot quicker than I think anybody anticipated. And I wouldn't be shocked if some of those guys were called up at some point. You mentioned Silseth. I do like his arm. I think there is definitely something there. The fact that he was the quickest player from his draft class to make it to the majors and, up and down results. But the fact that he made it that quickly gives you an idea that maybe he can do something for you. So I look at those guys. I think Busch and Bachman are clearly the top two pitching prospects, and they're in the upper minors right now. So I think they're going to be up next year, whether that's as a starter or reliever. I don't know yet, but I do think they're going to see some time.
That's good.
Well, we had some good pitching talk, and for our last segment, of course, we're joined by the great Brent Maguire, who is a former host of Locked On Angels and very involved in baseball. Just brings a lot of knowledge and insight to the game. Now we want to talk about the hitting side, and we all know that kind of surprise, the offense really fell off this season, and it was even with the injuries to Rendon and Mike Trout, it seemed like the rest of the team suffered from a lack of offense and not being able to hit the fastball. The contact was down. We definitely missed David Fletcher in that regard. That's another injury that happened, but the offense was a surprising issue this year. So Brent, in terms of fixing the Angels and filling in some of those roles that need to be filled, of course, the Angels will probably do it on a budget, as they always try to do. But how would you fix the Angels in terms of the offense? What hitters would you bring in? Any moves that you would make? Hit us with those.
So this one's tough because for the first time in a while, the offense was the problem last year. And yes, a lot of that was due to Rendon missing so much time and Trout missing some time, but it's not like those were the only issues. I mean, they rolled through the season with a questionable middle infield. They tried to, they hoped for Brandon Marsh and Joe Adell maybe making more contributions. The whole experiment did not work. I don't have the stats in front of me, but I remember seeing a stat surface about the Angels 6 through 9 hitters having one of the worst OPSs, if not the worst OPS in baseball. While at the top you had Trout and Ohtani giving you this elite production. Taylor Ward was a surprise, like top 30 bat in baseball last year. You had those guys, but then the second that you got into the middle or the bottom part of the order, you had nothing.
Right.
So you look at the weaknesses on this team. I mean, first and foremost, they need a shortstop. They've got to go get a shortstop. There are too many quality shortstops available in these off seasons to not go get someone. And yeah, they're going to cost money. It costs money to go get talented players. That's just the reality of
what a concept.
Brilliant statement.
And look, I understand Angels fans who get wary of giving out big contracts, but that's what it's going to take to bring in a big shortstop. They don't have that guy internally. So if you want a Trey Turner or Carlos Correa, Xander Bogaerts, Dansby Swanson, who are all available this offseason, you've got to invest the money. And if you're looking for a single weakness for the Angels, I mean, that's it right there. I don't think the option, I don't think you put David Fletcher at shortstop or a combination of Fletcher and Rengifo. Like, I think you've got to go make a move for one of these guys. And maybe it's not Carlos Correa at $350 million. Maybe Dansby Swanson is more in your budget, but they've got to do something at the shortstop position.
Well, and I think that plays into the fact of, when it comes to Shohei Ohtani and hoping to have him around long-term, you got to show him that you want to win. And a winning move is getting one of those free agent shortstops and not, counting on a merry-go-round of, Tyler Wade and David Fletcher and Renief. Like, that was really silly last season because it was just this rotating in and out Matt Duffy and Andrew Velasquez. And Mike and I have talked many times about you can kind of disguise that hole in the lineup with bats like Trout and Rendon and Shohei. But when one or more of those bats is out of the lineup, then you're exposed. And you're exactly right. The 5 through 9 had one of the worst OPS stats in the league. So how do you feel about now that they have kind of a clear picture of the outfield? I mean, of course, there's Joe Adell and Mickey Moniak, the youngsters, but you got Trout in center field. Taylor Ward's probably going to be back in right field. Do you want to see them get a left fielder, or do you think they roll with Joe Adell and Moniak, or some combination there?
So it's tempting to want to say we're going to roll with Moniak and Adell, but I do think there's a lot of risk. Both of those guys have mainly struggled in their time at the major league level. Mm-hmm. And yes, one of them could hit. I don't envision both of them hitting at the same time at the major league level. I mean, that just based on what we've seen. So yes, I do think they need a left fielder. It does complicate the picture because if you go get another outfielder, it does make it harder for Adell and Moniak to fit in that picture.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that having too much depth is not a bad thing. With Trout's,
especially for this team.
With Trout's injuries, I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing to go invest in a left fielder. And you don't have to go out and sign Aaron Judge to go in the outfield. I mean, there are plenty of guys available who might make sense. I mean, you look at a guy like Jock Peterson. You could go get a guy like Michael Brantley, who's been hurt this year, but up until that point was one of the more consistently good hitters in baseball. I mean, guys are going to be available for a cheaper price. So I think I would go that route, finding, a decent left field bat, Benintendi or the aforementioned names. So yeah, I think they do need to go get another bat for the outfield.
Do you think that the hitting coach, Jeremy Reed, really had a negative effect on this team this year? Because obviously Angel fans, and John and I are included in that, were relentless when it came to him because it just seemed like they didn't have a game plan. There was a stretch of games where it just looked like they forgot to swing the bat, and then there was a stretch of games where they were swinging at terrible pitches. And so how much do you think Jeremy Reed affected this team in a positive way? Because you do have stories like Taylor Ward figuring it out, right? But also, how much do you think he affected this team in a negative way with some of the guys that have struggled that really haven't struggled until this season?
It's always tough to talk about your favorite team's coaches because I'm fairly certain that every fan base thinks their hitting coach or pitching coach or bullpen is the worst in baseball. There's always like this extreme of thinking,
you are correct, sir.
With that being said, I mean, the Angels regressed offensively in so many different ways last year, and there was still a lot of that talent from the previous years around. I mean, you look at a guy like Jared Walsh going from a well above average hitter, a guy who was an all-star, to not hitting. And yes, could be injury related as well, but you've got another guy like Max Stassi who went from a completely fine hitting catcher to one of the worst hitters in the league. You look at the total picture, and I don't know if I could sit here and say that Jeremy Reed was the problem, but I also don't know if he was actually actively making the Angels a better offense. I think it was clearly time for a change based on what we saw this year. I mean, that offense was non-existent for a lot of the year after the hot start to the season. So we'll see if a new hitting coach can come in and maybe transform this offense and at least get some of the guys back to their career norms. But I do think it was time to move on from Jeremy Reed.
Let me get you with one more question. And speaking of moving on, how did you feel about the whole Joe Maddon situation? Do you feel like it was the right move, the wrong move? How did you feel about that?
So based on everything that we have, I do think the way that the Angels went about firing him maybe was not the best. There maybe could have been a little more dialogue in advance to talking to him. But with that being said, you lose 14 games in a row. with the roster, with some of the talent that the Angels have. And the writing was on the wall. I mean, I think everybody saw that coming. And, you know, everybody has their own opinion on Joe Madden and kind of the discourse that's taken place between the old school and the analytics. But the fact of the matter is analytics do play a huge role in baseball now. And based on what we've heard and what Joe Madden has publicly said, he didn't want to listen to what they were telling him from up above. And, you know, yes, the role of a manager has shifted in the last couple of decades, but that's the reality of the situation. Joe Madden was once one of the most forward-thinking, analytical managers in baseball. It was pretty clear by the time that he was fired that he was on the opposite spectrum. And it does stink. This guy was, you know, an Angel for life, essentially. He started there, spent a lot of years in the organization, and it sucks that that's the way he went out. But a lot of it appears to be self-inflicted, and, you know, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Hey, Brent is out there. He's a fantastic writer. Of course, he's a great follow on Twitter. But Brent, where can everybody reach you and your availability to contribute in terms of writing? Put all of that out there so everybody knows how to get at you.
Yeah, so I'm kind of in limbo right now. I literally just made this kind of shift to get back into baseball. So you can follow me, the Twitter account, bmags94. And when you go to that account, I have a link to my own personal blog. So that's where I'm doing a lot of my blogs currently.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brent.
Well, thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen today. Now for your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. They share some of the biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, and of course, the take of the day. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.
We want to thank our guest, Brent Maguire. Again, you can follow him at bmags94. You can get at us, the show, at Locked On Angels on Twitter and at Super Halo Bros on Twitter and Instagram. Brent, thank you for being here with us today.
Yeah,
we really appreciate it.
Well, thank you guys. This was a lot of fun. It's been too long, and it was nice to be back on the show.
I think everybody's going to be glad to see your face and hear your voice again, and have you part of the show. It has just been really special. And again, you made me a fan of this show when you were on it, and it's really a pleasure to get to do this show and do it with my brother too.
Yeah. Brent, it's like riding a bike. You were so smooth and so good. And I hope the Angels are listening because your ideas were great.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, Mike, what do we have on deck for tomorrow's show?
Johnny, I literally wrote for tomorrow's show, stadium nonsense, because it just seems like nothing ever goes right. And Brent, you said it at the start of the show. You said, the Angels are always in the news, whether it's good or bad, and most often it's bad. And so John and I are going to cover all of the stadium nonsense and what's happening with the city and new ownership and people suing who and what's happening. It's just it's chaos. And that's tomorrow on Locked On Angels.
And we're going to talk about it all tomorrow on Locked On Angels. Until then, my name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
And we hope that you'll join us again tomorrow. One more thanks to our guest, Brent Maguire. We hope you have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.